The radar screen exploded with warnings. Distance closing, 500 meters, 400, 300. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS William P. Lawrence, every eye locked onto the threat display as a Chinese J-16 fighter jet hurtled toward them at nearly 600 miles per hour. Contact inbound, altitude 250 feet. He's not breaking off. The words cut through the tension like a knife. On the bridge, the officer of the deck gripped the railing, watching the dark shape materialize against the horizon, growing impossibly large, impossibly fast. 200 meters, weapon systems on standby, fire control radars locked, hearts pounding. 150 meters. Sailors on deck froze, staring up at the screaming mass of metal and missiles bearing down on them. 100 meters. This was it. The moment where miscalculation becomes catastrophe, where routine patrol becomes international incident, where one pilot's decision could ignite World War III. Then, at just 150 feet from the destroyer's bow, the fighter jet roared past in a deafening blur of thrust and fury, its jet wash hammering the deck like a physical blow. The date was April 24th, 2025. The location, the Taiwan Strait, the most dangerous waters on Earth. And for 90 breathless minutes that followed, everyone aboard that American warship understood one horrifying truth. They were balancing on the knife's edge between controlled operation and uncontrollable crisis. One wrong move, one trigger pulled, one collision, that's all it would take. This wasn't a routine intercept. This was a game of chicken played at supersonic speed with nuclear-armed superpowers, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The USS William P. Lawrence, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, had entered the Taiwan Strait that morning with purpose. Part of the U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet, she was conducting what Washington calls a freedom of navigation operation, a deliberately visible patrol designed to assert that international waters remain exactly that, international. The 110-mile-wide strait separating Taiwan from mainland China isn't just geography, it's a flashpoint. Beijing claims these waters as internal territory. Washington, along with most of the international community, categorically rejects that claim. So when the Lawrence steamed into the strait on April 24th, she did so knowing full well she was being watched. Overhead, a U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft maintained constant surveillance, its advanced sensors sweeping the skies and surface simultaneously. Allied assets throughout the region were on heightened alert, coordinating through secure channels. The entire operation was choreographed with military precision, every waypoint plotted, every contingency wargamed. The objective was crystal clear: demonstrate America's commitment to keeping these waters open regardless of Beijing's objections. But Beijing wasn't about to let this pass quietly. Hundreds of miles away, Chinese radar operators had been tracking the destroyer since she approached the strait. The People's Liberation Army Navy scrambled surveillance aircraft from nearby bases. One of their warships, designated 132, began shadowing the American vessel from a calculated distance. The radio crackled to life with a message the Lawrence's crew had heard countless times before. This is Chinese Warship 132. You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Turn around immediately. On the bridge, no one flinched. This was standard PLA Navy harassment, part of the psychological game both sides play in these waters. But this time, the warning came with teeth. A J-16 fighter jet, China's most capable twin-engine multi-role aircraft, was already screaming toward them from the east. Built for speed, intimidation, and overwhelming firepower, the J-16 is no showpiece. Today's loadout likely included PL-10 infrared-guided air-to-air missiles, long-range PL-15s capable of engaging targets beyond visual range, anti-ship missiles, and sophisticated electronic warfare pods. This was a warplane configured for maximum threat projection, and it was coming in hot. From the deck of the William P. Lawrence, sailors watched the dark silhouette materialize against the horizon, growing larger with terrifying speed. The jet was flying low, dangerously low, skimming just a few hundred feet above the wavetops in a tactical profile designed to minimize radar detection time and maximize shock value. Inside the ship's Combat Information Center, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Consoles lit up with proximity alerts. Contact inbound, marking Mach 0.9, altitude 250 feet, bearing 086. The numbers told a stark story. The J-16 wasn't maintaining a safe observation distance. It was conducting an aggressive intercept run, closing at nearly 600 miles per hour at an altitude that left virtually no margin for error. As the jet roared toward the destroyer, it dropped even lower, its afterburners creating visible shock waves in the humid air. Then came the moment that would be replayed in Pentagon briefing rooms for months. The J-16 screamed past the Lawrence's bow at just 150 feet. 150 feet. For perspective, that's roughly the wingspan of a Boeing 777. At those speeds, at that altitude, there's no room for miscalculation. A slight gust of wind, a momentary control input error, a mechanical malfunction, any of these could have sent the fighter careening into the destroyer's superstructure. The thunderous roar of the jet engines reverberated across the deck, creating a physical shockwave that sailors would later describe as feeling like a gut punch. This wasn't recklessness, this was calculated intimidation, executed with military precision for maximum psychological impact. Inside the Combat Information Center, the response was immediate and professional. The Lawrence's AN Spy-1D radar, capable of simultaneously tracking hundreds of airborne threats across 300 miles, had locked onto the J-16 the moment it appeared on sensors. Fire control systems came alive. The ship's 5-inch Mark 45 deck gun and phalanx CIWS close-in weapon systems shifted to standby mode, ready to engage if the tactical picture deteriorated. Bridge crews maintained continuous visual contact, while communication officers logged every detail for the incident report that would inevitably follow. The Chinese pilot had entered what naval warfare doctrine defines as a weapons engagement zone, a range where an armed hostile aircraft could launch anti-ship missiles and score hits within seconds. The destroyer was now at DEFCON equivalent heightened readiness, walking the razor's edge between defensive posture and potential escalation. Every crew member understood the rules of engagement. Don't escalate, but be ready for anything.
Back at U.S. Indo-Pacific Command headquarters, real-time data streamed in through secure channels. Senior officers watched the incident unfold live via satellite feeds and sensor data from multiple platforms. This was immediately categorized as something beyond routine harassment. The proximity, speed, and aggressive flight profile made this intercept inherently dangerous, not just to the American sailors, but ironically to the Chinese pilot himself. Unfortunately, this aggressive behavior has become a pattern. In 2023, a Chinese fighter jet cut directly across the nose of a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea, forcing the American plane to fly through its jet wash, a maneuver that could have caused loss of control. In 2024, another J-16 released chaff and flares perilously close to a U.S. surveillance aircraft, creating a debris field that posed collision risks. But buzzing a 9,000-ton guided missile destroyer at full afterburner this close represented a significant escalation in Beijing's tactical playbook. The J-16 wasn't finished. After completing its initial pass, the fighter banked hard, circled back, and made a second run, this time even lower. Sailors on the open deck could see astonishing detail, the pilot's helmet visor reflecting the morning sun, the slight shimmer of heat distortion from the engines, the weapons hardpoints loaded and ready. The fighter roared overhead again, leaving a trail of noise, heat, and barely suppressed tension. Then it pulled up hard, afterburners blazing, and climbed back to medium altitude. That moment crystallized the reality for everyone aboard the William P. Lawrence. In waters this politically charged, a single miscalculation, a hydraulic failure, a judgment error, or a misinterpreted signal could ignite a crisis that neither Washington nor Beijing actually wanted, but both might be unable to control. If the pilot had misjudged his trajectory by mere meters, the jet could have clipped the destroyer's mast, or worse, triggered a defensive response that would have made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, Chinese warship 132 maintained its parallel course at 3 to 4 nautical miles, close enough to monitor, but far enough to claim plausible deniability. Both vessels exchanged standard maritime radio hails, maintaining the veneer of professional naval conduct even as tensions peaked overhead. The real confrontation was playing out in 3 dimensions above the water. For the next 90 minutes, the J-16 remained in the area, circling at medium altitude like a predator unwilling to abandon its claim. On board the destroyer, watch rotation stayed razor-sharp, coffee consumption spiked. No one relaxed. This wasn't a training exercise or a simulation. This was real-world great power competition conducted at the edge of acceptable risk. The message from Beijing was unmistakable. Every U.S. presence in the Taiwan Strait will be watched, challenged, and actively contested. But Washington's response was equally clear. International waters remain open to navigation, and the U.S. Navy will sail wherever international law permits, regardless of how uncomfortable that makes Beijing. Eventually, the J-16 broke off and returned to base. Chinese warship 132 turned south, reducing speed. The William P. Lawrence completed its transit through the strait deliberately, methodically, and without further incident. But the encounter had already achieved something neither side explicitly intended. It had crystallized just how quickly routine operations can spiral towards something far more dangerous. Within hours, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command released a terse statement. A People's Republic of China J-16 fighter jet conducted an unsafe intercept of a U.S. Navy destroyer operating in international waters. This type of behavior is dangerous and risks miscalculation. Chinese state media responded predictably, accusing the U.S. of provocative actions and framing the intercept as necessary defense against foreign intrusion into Chinese territory. But the footage and radar tracks didn't lie. The J-16's passes were aggressive, unnecessary, and conducted well below accepted safety standards for military aviation over open water. For the sailors aboard the William P. Lawrence, it was another day on one of the world's most dangerous flashpoints. But for military analysts and decision-makers in Washington, Beijing, and Taipei, the encounter raised urgent questions that extend far beyond a single incident. Did the Chinese pilot act independently, or was this intercept conducted under direct orders designed to test American reactions? Was this part of a coordinated escalation strategy or an isolated gesture of tactical opportunism? These questions now occupy considerable attention in defense intelligence circles because the answers will shape how both sides approach future encounters in these contested waters. What's certain is that U.S. Navy destroyers like the William P. Lawrence will continue their patrols, and Chinese ships and aircraft will continue their intercepts. The line between legitimate assertion of international rights and dangerous aggression grows thinner with each passing month. With tensions over Taiwan's status, South China Sea militarization, and regional security architecture at generational highs, the risks compound exponentially. What happened on April 24, 2025, was more than a dangerous maneuver. It was a window into the nature of modern great power competition, where escalation doesn't necessarily begin with missiles or declarations of war, but with split-second decisions made by individual pilots and ship captains operating under enormous pressure at 500 knots with 150 feet of clearance. One reckless move, one miscommunication, one equipment failure. That's all it takes. And in the Taiwan Strait, where two nuclear-armed powers test each other's resolve daily, there is absolutely no margin for error. The incident also exposed something deeper about the evolving nature of military confrontation in the 21st century. Traditional warfare doctrine assumes clear distinctions between peace and conflict, between defensive posturing and active aggression. But what happened on April 24th exists in a murky middle ground that military strategists call gray zone operations. actions aggressive enough to assert dominance and test boundaries, yet calibrated to remain just below the threshold that would trigger direct military response or international condemnation severe enough to carry real consequences. The Chinese pilot who flew that J-16 wasn't trying to start a war. He was executing a mission designed to normalize aggressive behavior, to gradually shift what's considered acceptable conduct in these waters. Each close pass that doesn't result in collision or escalation becomes a precedent. Each protest from Washington that produces no substantive consequence becomes proof that Beijing can push further next time. This is warfare by incrementalism, where today's outrageous provocation becomes tomorrow's baseline expectation. For the crew of the William P. Lawrence, the incident has already faded into the operational background noise of their deployment. They'll conduct more straight transits, face more harassment, and maintain their professional composure throughout. But for regional allies watching nervously from Tokyo, Seoul, Manila, and especially Taipei, each of these encounters carries profound implications. The question isn't whether the next incident will occur, it's when, and whether next time someone's luck finally runs out. The tactical lessons from this encounter are already being incorporated into training protocols across the Pacific Fleet. Destroyer crews are drilling more intensively on rapid threat assessment procedures. Rules of engagement are being reviewed and refined to account for increasingly aggressive intercept tactics. Communication protocols between ships, aircraft, and command centers are being stress-tested to ensure split-second coordination when tensions spike. Every radar track from that April morning has been analyzed frame by frame. Every radio transmission parsed for tactical intelligence. The U.S. Navy learns from these encounters, adapting its procedures to maintain operational effectiveness while minimizing the risk of accidental escalation. Meanwhile, in Beijing, military planners are conducting their own after-action reviews, assessing whether the aggressive intercept achieved its desired psychological and strategic effects. Did it deter future U.S. transits? Did it demonstrate resolve to domestic audiences? Did it expose any vulnerabilities in American defensive postures? These calculations will inform the next encounter, and the one after that, in an endless cycle of action and reaction that defines modern great power competition.